Well, I want to welcome this distinguished panel. I want to thank Congressman Harwood and Professor John Geer for their efforts and their energy to make this program possible here today. Halperin, you more than any other person, you stand responsible for this lineup we see here. This rogues gallery and of journalists and academics. I want to thank you personally for all you did to make this this happen. And
first of all, give John Seigenthaler a round of applause. I cannot think of a better person or place for name of a place for this to happen than someone whose name personifies not only free speech but the work that goes into ensuring that that speech, as he often says, is safe and secure, and for all of us to understand that it's a process in making that speech safe and secure. This is an historic moment for our state, for this city, an historic election involving two candidates and two vice presidential candidates who will inherit one of the most incredible situations a president has inherited in the last 100 years. Barack Obama and Joe Biden, who are a formidable Democratic team, John McCain and Sarah Palin, who has proven to be a stronger and more resilient team than some thought from the outset. We're delighted to have two of them here in our city, and equally delighted on this great campus and this great center to have some of the leading thinkers, writers, pontificators, and the word was used earlier, bloviators, in the political world join us here on this late morning. I am delighted to be a member of this tremendous faculty here at this great university, Vanderbilt. And I say that because many of our students from the class that John Geer and I teach from Elections 08 are here. If you're from that class, raise your hand. We won't remember faces, but if we could, you'd get extra credit, so put your hand up. I'm delighted also with my other capacity at NBC News to be joined by a few of my colleagues there, including John Harwood, including Chris Matthews, who has been a longtime friend, and including my longtime friend Howard Fineman. The rest of this panel, and Kornblut from the Washington Post, who has not only followed this campaign but others, and brings an astuteness to not only the writing about politics but the strategy behind what the strategists are thinking. We're delighted that she's here. Joe Klein, who has covered not only so many races but so many strategies in races, has written about strategies in races. He's so good he wrote a book and didn't have to put his name on it. It was a bestseller. By Anonymous. We're delighted to have Jonathan Martin from one of the new entrants in the political contribution arena, from Politico. It is an interactive and online site that frankly allows up to the minute, right sort of live as it's actually happening, politics that happen. One of the reasons he was late coming to the panel because he was finishing a story, reporting on a story that will go up here in probably a few minutes. I'm delighted that he's here, a groundbreaking media person himself, and certainly the company that works for Jonathan Bankley. He sits next to John Geer, many of you know, acting chair of our poli-sci department. I call him my boss here at the university because he allows me to teach and share class with he and Ben Weber and Bruce Oppenheimer, who is our partner in the class also, who sits in the front row as well. Al Fromm, who sits next to him, is the founder and chairman of the Democratic Leadership Council, another post I'm fortunate to have. My wife wonders why I work so much, and I look in her shoe closet and I say, sweetie, this is why I work so much. Would allow me to be chairman of the Democratic Leadership Council as well, founding the organization some 23 years ago when Democrats found themselves in an interesting and tough spot in national politics. Many of you may remember the group or know of the group because of its affiliation with the young governor from Arkansas in '91, named Bill Clinton, who was chair of the organization at the time. The organization's mantra, fiscal responsibility, pro-defense, pro-business, finding ways for Democrats to be in the mainstream and ensure that we win national elections. We're glad that he joins us and thank him for his service. John Harwood, who's with CNBC, MSNBC, and the New York Times, is one of the premier business and political writers understanding the intersection between the two in ways that few in the business do. We're delighted that he's here. He came over from doing a live shot on one of the affiliates and one of the NBC networks, and when rain caught him, we were fortunate he was not as wet as Fineman when he got here. And finally, John Seigenthaler, the titan and the leader of this group. I will turn over to Mr. Seigenthaler for the first question.
Thank you
The
very
format
much.
is to allow this conversation to take place and to perhaps take a few questions from the audience before we end. With that,
Well, thanks very much, Congressman Forward, great leader in our state and a great leader here at this university. The question is, why are we, and I guess that title of this really suggests where the country is, where are we now and how did we get here? That's sort of the gravamen of what we're going to talk about, and obviously you heard Congressman Ford say a historic moment in the life of Nashville's politics, and indeed it is. You think about where we are and how we got here. The next question is, what does it mean? And as we got up this morning, there were a new rash of polls that seek to tell us where we are. Chris Matthews, you're on top of those polls.
Well, they're NBC.
Give us some insight.
Well, they're NBC polls, Harwood knows about, and Wall Street Journal polls as well. And the main four that I thought were grabbers were, number one was a question that NBC and Wall Street Journal pollers have been asking for years, which is the country headed in the right direction or the wrong direction? Totally nonpartisan question. You like the way things are going or don't you? It's always been a very good leading indicator of political change coming or not. And right now, 12% of the country think we're headed in the right direction. You have to wonder who they are, the 12%. What ship are they on? The other one is the unpopularity of the president. I've been around a while covering politics since I was a kid. I loved it. I'm not covering it, but loving politics. And I've never seen a situation. I guess you'd have to go back to Richard Nixon, but when you have a president with 45% very negative feelings toward, 45% have very negative feelings towards President Bush, which is very interesting. In my coverage, I never get personal with him, but I have to tell you, there's some people that have a personal view of the guy that's very negative. Almost half the country really don't like him. So that's a dramatic millstone around the neck of any Republican running this year. The other one's something called the generic number, which is we ask people, do you want a Democratic Congress next year or a Republican Congress next year, without any name attached to it, just the brand name of the two parties. And there's a 13% spread for the Democrats. Despite all the negative attitudes in the country evident in the other parts of the poll about the U.S. Congress, for whatever reason, people want the Democrats to run the Congress next time. A 13-point spread, which has been the case before. But the fact that that still dominates the way people think. They want change toward the Democrats. And the fourth thing I notice if I look over the poll is the prevalence of, or the predominance of Barack Obama, with all the historic breakthrough he represents and everything else, in a very rocky year and a half or so. He has been leading the poll against John McCain going back to April of '07. And so there's been a long, consistent sense that we're going to have a political change this year and that he will be the change if it's that choice. And I do think that gelling is very important in politics. Not everybody pays attention to the polling. But after a couple of weeks, you get used to hearing, oh, he's in the lead. And people are used to the idea now that Barack's in the lead, are becoming very used to it. And they're okay with it seems. They're not jumping ship, which means the first African-American president isn't scaring people. He's not scaring people. And I think tonight's very important. If he comes off again, as he did last time in the debate, calm and confident, not edgy at all, he will probably keep that number where it is. That's why tonight's all about edginess and who's going to upset the apple cart. It's in McCain's interest to have a very edgy debate tonight. So I think if he's calm and collected again, it's a win for him. But I think that's the state of the art right now.
Well, I think we all might just react to that. Joe, what's your sense of what Chris says?
Well, Joe, I can add, as you think about that, what would you, in light of what Chris said, what would you advise John McCain to do? Chris gave, I think you said right on point what Barack would need to do. How would you advise John McCain with your years of experience as you react to that?
Could I step back from that? I agree with what Chris just said. But back to your original question, where are we? How did we get here? Where we are is this. In fact, I named a character in primary colors after this phenomenon. His name was Orlando Ozio, the governor of New York. And Machiavelli once said that Ozio is the greatest enemy of a republic. Ozio is indolence in Italian. And Machiavelli was really concerned about how you keep a republic coherent when it's not at war. And we have had in this country the greatest experiment in Ozio in human history since the end of World War II. Relative peace and prosperity. We've had wars, but they weren't existential wars. We've had downturns, but they weren't the kind of really scary downturn that we're having now. And in the course of that, we've lost the habits of citizenship. We've become much less rigorous about our democracy. And so, on behalf of my generation, the baby boomers, and looking at this audience, can I just say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry we sucked at this so badly. And I think that right now, as opposed to any other election that I have covered, the public is in a far more serious mood than my colleagues in the media or the people who are strategizing, these campaigns. I think that John McCain has run one of the least serious campaigns I've ever seen at a time of real crisis. I think that Barack Obama hasn't asked enough of the public and told the truth enough about how difficult the times are going to be and how much sacrifice you're going to have to make, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, if Chris is right and that gap is there, I think Congressman Ford's right. What does McCain have to do tonight? And beyond that, how will, and I think many people and many of the networks are saying, he has to get tough, he has to become aggressive, he has to go negative. And if you look at Sarah Palin the last couple of days, that's the way she's gone. But how is that going to affect tonight? And
I guess it's hard to know what you could do at this point. I think there are a few sort of benchmarks backing up from the election points when you start to believe the numbers are actually true. We're getting into that zone. My personal date is October 26th, which is 10 days out from the election, when I think you can really start to believe it and believe that a trajectory that we're on can't really be reversed. But we're getting into that zone now. I think in addition to the national polls that Chris was talking about, the really important polling is taking place in the individual states, as you all know. I mean, we're into the electoral college time frame where every day you need to wake up and look at those individual states. So today in the Washington Post we have a poll about Ohio. The interesting top line number, the number I run to is who's winning, which is Obama. In today's poll, he's up by 6 points. But the more interesting question, sort of beneath all of that in the fundamentals, is what do people care about? And the economy, no surprise, is number one. 51% of the people in this poll in Ohio said far and away that's what they care about. Number two, way down at 9% is Iraq. And I don't know what you do between 51% and 9% if you're John McCain to get back to the issue that you dominate. I guess he could upset the apple cart. He could be a rabble-rouser in the debate tonight. But I think Joe's right. People want a serious discussion. And I think that we saw with lipstick on a pig, I don't think I need to refer to it as anything more than that. I think that incident encapsulated what was sort of a frivolity in some of the media and by the campaigns, and that voters didn't like. It didn't work. So for him to do that, it might be a distraction. We might talk less about the economy. I don't see how that recaptures it for him. I've heard so much pessimism and depression almost from the Republicans I know, the Republican strategists, particularly the ones who ran 2000 and 2004 for President Bush in some pretty hard times and against some odds then, who feel like the McCain people are sort of blowing it or haven't figured out how to talk seriously about some of the things they could do differently or even to emphasize the things that President Bush did well. I got one email this morning from a very well-respected Republican who said there's time for McCain to make it up, but not much, and not much left, and it's hard for me to see how he would do it. So there's a sense of real anxiety, and I don't know what advice I would give.
Howard, how do you react to you and John both, how do you react to what Joe said, that number one, McCain has run not the most serious campaign that you would expect during this critical time? And to pick up on Ann's last point, obviously he can, but what would he have to do to make up between now and election day in the next 28 days?
Well, I would like to start by mentioning a guy I met on the plane coming down here last night. He's a songwriter who lives here in Nashville. He's 40-something, maybe early 50s, has a long graying ponytail, and has written a lot of songs, including one called American Soldier, which Toby Keith recorded, and it was a pan of praise to the bravery of the everyday American soldier who's willing to put his life on the line. And it was a big hit in, I think, 2002. He's the guy that I was talking to, Chuck Cannon, is from South Carolina, and he's generally speaking fairly conservative, I think. He's skeptical of, quote, government, big government solutions and so forth. And so I said, okay, well, you know, what are you going to do? Who are you for? And he said, geez, I'm undecided. To quote an old songwriter, I ain't for both of them. And that impressed me, because if John McCain isn't winning that guy, who writes for Toby Keith, I don't know who he's going to get. And I said, well, I asked him the question you were asking me, what should McCain do? And I said, because everybody's saying McCain's really got to go for the throat. You know, the cliche of this year is game changer. Just to underscore Joe's point about the triviality of much of what we do. You know, what's the big game changer? You know, like we're watching Monday Night Football. And I said, well, everybody's saying he's got to go for Obama's throat. What do you think? And he says, no, that's exactly the wrong thing to do. Because what people liked about John McCain, and I'm one of the people, I'm a reporter, not an editorialist or an opinionizer, but you know, I covered McCain for years, and I've always liked the guy on a personal level. I went to Vietnam with him after the 2000 campaign, saw the Hanoi Hilton, saw the lake he fell into, understood his bravery. That self-sacrificing, honest, essentially non-political John McCain is the one that people liked. Now he's put himself in a situation where he's basically surrendered to the activist grassroots of the party, embodied by Sarah Palin, who was basically created in the Karl Rove Petri dish. She is the perfect Rovian candidate. No history, no memory. Politically correct in the narrow sense that she's a woman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, from the West, you name it. So McCain, by picking her, sort of surrendered to that. Now he's going to go the rest of the way, and he's going to he's faced with the choice tonight of giving up what's left of what made people like Chuck Cannon, the songwriter, like him, and somehow trying to derail Obama, who, as Chris pointed out, you know, has been basically the default setting for the last years that he's been in the lead. Now, how the heck is McCain going to do that? He's going to say that McCain, or at least what Sarah Palin has been saying, is that McCain has been palling around. Obama has been palling around with terrorists. So they're going to somehow try to draw a connection between Bill Ayers and the Weathermen and Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden. That they're going to say, see, Barack Obama just by nature likes to pal around with terrorists. You can't have a guy like that as president. Now, the tricky thing here is going to be, this is a town hall format. And first of all, it's difficult to be the attack dog as the candidate, because if people don't like you, they're going to like you even less if you attack too visibly. You want other people to attack. McCain's in a situation where he has to be the attacker, and that's a difficult situation to be in. It's even a more difficult situation to be in when you've got a town hall audience. And that's a special circumstance, because you can put off and horrify the people in the crowd if you're not careful. So McCain, this is it for McCain as far as I can see. He's got to do something tonight, but I don't know what it's going to be.
John, what do you say about that?
Well, first of all, we've got half dozen reporters up here. I'm hoping we add up to 1 or 2 brains between all of us. And because I have half a brain, I wore Vanderbilt colors in honor of the... I agree with most of what my colleagues have said. I want to make two points. One about a narrower point about McCain tonight. I agree with my colleagues. I don't see how Jeremiah Wright, Tony Rezko, Bill Ayers can possibly work for John McCain in this environment. This economic story and the anxiety surrounding it, he had a global sell-off yesterday, is just too big. And I don't think he has any choice but to engage on the economic issue and try to drive an affirmative argument and give people some confidence that he knows what he's talking about and he's got some way to lead us out of this. He doesn't have to accept the Democratic story of exactly how we got in the mess we're in. There's a respectable argument on the other side. It's not a straight line between sort of Republican free market deregulation all the way down into the, abyss that we're looking at right now. You can make a respectable argument for important aspects of Republican economic policy over the last generation. He's going to have to do that. He's not winning the policy argument at all in the election on health care, on the economy. You look at our NBC Wall Street Journal poll that's out today, he's down 18 points in terms of who can better manage the economy. That's killing him. And unless he can turn that around, he's going to lose the election. So he can get edgy and he can do Bill Ayers and all that sort of stuff. My own belief is that that is not going to work for him. The second point is just in terms of John's original question about how did we get here. Throughout my lifetime, and certainly, as I became aware of politics and have been following it, it has felt as if conservatism and the sort of set of policies and philosophies surrounding it have been more or less ascendant in politics. Republicans have won 7 out of the last 10 presidential elections. Democrats have played defense in terms of adapting, people like Bill Clinton adapting to free market ideology, moving away from the era of big government. And the question for me is whether that we're coming to the end of that phase and starting a new phase. And I don't know what the new phase is exactly, but Obama had a line in the debate the other night in Oxford, which he's used that on the stump, and I think it's sort of a powerful line if he can really persuade people of the merits of this argument, that the financial crisis is the final verdict on this set of Republican economic policies. If that is accepted by the public, if he wins, which he's likely to do, and Democrats are likely to have bigger majorities in the Congress, they could make a serious change in national priorities through the tax code, through the health care system, through energy policy. And so that it's possible that could be the beginning of something new. And again, that goes to back to what I was saying about McCain tonight. I think McCain has got to make some counter-argument to this final verdict idea and say, no, it's not. Like, there are some specific reasons, some narrow reasons why we've gotten to where we are, but it's not the story that Obama's telling you, and persuade people that he's on something.
Jonathan, you just, I think, had a conversation with somebody high up in one of these campaigns and be able to give us some real-time sense. Based on what you've heard, is that can you reconcile what you just talked about to the extent you can share?
Sure. Yeah, I was just talking to a top McCain advisor about the game plan for tonight, and it actually reconfirmed something that I thought that Howard mentioned very smartly, and that is, it is darn tough to put a knife in somebody's back when they're standing right in front of you. The fact is, these town hall forums do not lend themselves well for what John McCain's got to do, which is to really go on the attack tonight. This McCain advisor told me they recognize the difficulty of trying to sort of strike that balance between putting Obama back on his heels, but not coming off too aggressive that you'll turn off not just the studio audience, but the folks at home. I would make two brief points in conjunction with that. The first one, John McCain's challenge is made more difficult because of the already established narrative about his temper and his own personal disposition. In that first debate, you saw some flashes of just what is, his lack of regard for Barack Obama. Never calling him Barack, rarely, even looking over at him. So McCain has to sort of deal with that, of trying to be aggressive and really put Obama on defense, but not do so in a way where he comes off as being angry. And it kind of reminds me of 2000. Al Gore had this sort of Goldilocks problem. He was too hot and then he was too cold. It's even tougher this time around because of McCain's temper sort of narrative that Gore didn't have. And so that really is something I think that McCain has a challenge with tonight. And then secondly, the fact is that for all of the talk about Ayers and Rezko, the question people are going to ask tonight are going to be about their pocketbooks. And how do you pivot from talking about the market plunging and about putting food on the table and paying your taxes and paying your mortgage and your car payment, to talking about some 60s era hippie. It's not an easy pivot to make at all. And I don't think McCain, my conversation, Harold, I don't think McCain's going to try and bring up Rezko and Ayers tonight. The hope, or at least the expectation, is that maybe Tom Brokaw, will provide some kind of an opening, but it's going to be darn tough for McCain to go there with a set of sort of standard issue economic questions tonight from voters.
By the way, guys, this is fresh information. He was having this conversation and blogging on it in the elevator down to this room.
Let me ask Al, and I want to come back to Chris for a moment. Let me ask Al and Professor Geer, the numbers, in light of all that has been said, and we were on a panel yesterday, Professor Seigenthaler and I were, he actually was the closer of the panel, a civility forum hosted by Governor Bredesen and Senator Baker, where Governor Barber and Bernie Shaw and Mark Whitaker from NBC were on the panel.
Did you end up throwing chairs?
That was afterwards. We let everybody clear the room, and then we brought all the incivility back. But the numbers show that Barack, 80-20, I think was the number that you quoted, Chris, where the right track, wrong track, or wrong track 80.
Actually, it's
Well, forgive me, so it's even worse. Why then aren't the numbers in this race 49? I think the last poll I saw this morning from our network and WSJ showed, I think, a 49-43 race. You've followed these races, if I'm not mistaken. We've issued a report that you helped draft regarding 3 races Democrats won, presidential, 3 they lost. Give us a minute's sense of what this really means here as we, historical sense.
Well, I think there are 2 or 3 points that are important. We just looked at the last 5 presidential races and the 2006 congressional election. So it was 3 elections the Democrats won and 3 we lost it, to see what the difference was. And essentially, the difference is in white working class voters. White voters with high school educations, maybe some college, but no 4-year degree. They represent, and Democrats usually lose those voters, but the question is whether they lose them about 5 points or 25. They represent about 40% of the electorate, and so when you figure it out mathematically, it's a swing of almost 7%, 7 percentage points in an election between winning and losing Democratic years. The most interesting thing, I think, is in the last Pew study, which was done last week, where Obama had moved ahead, he had gained 11 points among white voters with some college. That is a critical component of the electorate. I think there are 2 or 3 things that are defining this race right now. Chris Matthews hit on one of them when he talked about the generic numbers. If you want to figure out whether McCain or Obama, whether Obama's going to do better in a poll or McCain's going to look surprisingly strong, look at one number, the party identification number. Right now, it's running right about 10. In the Wall Street Journal poll today, it was 8 points. Historically, in the last 6 elections, it's never been more than 2 points difference. So if the Democrats have an 8 or 10-point lead, it means that Obama is going to be very strong. The second number that was in the Wall Street Journal poll today, which I think is really important. I mean, the bottom has fallen out of McCain. Think about what McCain tried to do at his convention. He didn't have Bush come to his convention. He tried to bury Bush face down, so even when he clawed his way, he would go deeper, not come up to the top. What has this economic collapse done? It has brought Bush and the Republicans right back to the forefront. Think about the party ID numbers. I mean, what the Republican brand is extraordinarily damaged. And so when McCain started out at the convention to try to sort of say, well, you know, I'm more like you. Obama's a good guy, but he's a celebrity. He's like Oprah Winfrey. But you don't want him to be president, and he's not really like you anyway. That sort of cultural populism, you know, he's one of these guys like John Kerry who looks down on you, and I'm one of you. Well, that works maybe in an ordinary year, but when the economy falls out from under you, it doesn't work anymore. And there's a really fascinating number in the Wall Street Journal poll today. They asked what issues you can voting on. 59% are voting on economic issues, and 15% are voting on domestic issues. Well, those are the issues Democrats win 2-1. That's 3/4 of the electorate. Only 8% are voting on social issues, and 16% are voting on foreign policy issues. Those are issues the Republicans win 2-1. So the domain has really changed in favor of Obama. Compare that with 2004, and in 2004, more than half the electorate, 56%, voted on terrorism, Iraq, or moral values. Those are issues that generally cut for Bush. And only 37% voted on domestic issues in the economy. So what you've seen is a complete change in terrain. Now, what does McCain do about that? I don't want to be a McCain advisor, but
So before you become one, John Geer, react to what, because
let me just say, Harold, because in the Wall Street Journal poll, there are two numbers that would tell me what McCain ought to do if he's smart. One is, it says, would you rather have a president who goes away from Bush policies and brings more regulation to the economy, or would you rather have a president who goes against congressional policies of spending and waste, fraud, and abuse? And by 40, I think it's 47-38, they chose the latter. So his fiscal discipline message may be strong. And the other number is they asked, what do you want, a government that does more or less? And I think it was 47-46 or 48-47 for doing more. But the trend has been very sharply for less government as we've been going through this economic crisis. So if you ask me, McCain ought to go back to his basic economic message and forget about Bill Ayers.
By the way, if you do become a McCain advisor, you'd be the second Democratic Leadership Council join the campaign.
Well, the other one is lose his chairmanship in the Democratic.
Wonderful note, John Harwood. We appreciate that. In light of that, in light of what Al said this morning, Sarah Palin, her remarks this morning, I think hinted this morning that not only are they going to go there, but she indicated that they would support a government spending free, which is not a new idea for Republicans, but the free spending to be able to pay for their ideas right here during the town hall session, I believe, will challenge Senator Obama on that very issue. But Geer, give us a reaction to what you've heard. Chris, I want to get you right back, then finally right back in the conversation.
Well, let me just start with a personal note. I woke up this morning and I had to pinch myself because it dawned on me that Vanderbilt's the 13th ranked football team in the nation. Fighting to 5-0. A major debate is taking place in my hometown, and I'm going to be on this panel with these distinguished guests. I now know it is all downhill. The numbers that we're seeing, it strikes me, and again, I'm speaking here as a political scientist, which probably disqualifies me, maybe I should just leave immediately, but that I think what this economic crisis has done is hastened the kick into the fundamentals. That is that if you take the political science models, basically Barack Obama was going to win 53-47, 52-48, maybe 54-46, depending on which variables you use. And that's basically that the economy was going to drive things because we had a soft economy, and we knew that in June, and it played out. And what this economic turmoil has done is really made those numbers come to life and basically given Barack a 5 or 6 point edge in the national polls. And so this has really kicked in, and I think it's going to be very hard to move away from that. And this is because the economy is going to drive things, and all the numbers that people are talking about reinforce that. I do think that one thing that, especially given the cast of characters here and the colleagues, is that when we talk about the candidates and whether they're going to go negative or positive and how harsh they're going to go, that I think something that's changed in American politics is that there has been a shift in the incentive structure of campaigns to go negative. And what I mean by that is that when was the last time any of you or any of folks here wrote a story about a positive ad or talked about something like that? Right. It's very unusual. More people focus on the negative. And so that if you want as a candidate to get your message out, you tend to go negative because that's what's going to generate the news. So that to give you a little piece of data about this that I find very suggestive and troubling, that if you do a LexisNexis search from August 2004 to November 2004, and you put in the term SWIFT vote versus the term Iraq war, you get twice as many hits on the term SWIFT vote than Iraq war. And why is that? Well, because they focus heavily on that, maybe legitimately, but more so than the Iraq War, I'm not so sure. And a lot of you say, well, I know the term swift vote. It's not because you saw the ad. Very few people saw that ad. It was because of the news media's coverage of it. So that if McCain can rise above it, and our good friend Michael Powell said this morning during breakfast, arguing that McCain should rise above it and try to lay out, which many people have already talked about, a strong economic message, and just say, forget the going negative, and trying to do that, I think the public's receptive, because the American public right now is stressed, and they're also not fools. They aren't fools. I mean, they're going to vote, smartly, and if they pick up something genuine, especially McCain tonight, that could matter.
As someone who was a victim of negative ads, I can tell you they worked. I would ask Chris and Joe, in addition to going, we talked about all the positive and affirmative things that John said. At the end of the day, people react to negative ads, and you hope the reaction, if you run them, is in your favor. It's clear we're going to see a barrage of ads that are not focused on foreclosures, high gas prices, high food prices, and answers to those big questions. I saw you raise your hand, Joe, when the point was raised about a positive ad, and you wrote about it. I read a lot of your stuff. I don't remember that piece. I'm sure you did. I read all of your stuff, as I do Fineman. I don't want him mad at me. And but the reality is, a positive piece that was
about Obama's 2-minute ad where he talked to the camera about the economy.
But what I'm saying, to Geer's point, I think there's some truth there. But the three of you who cover this, on TV, and you write about it every week, give me a sense, as these negative ads as they come, and Barack presumably responds with negative ads of his own, how will that play? In Pennsylvania, and Ohio, and Michigan, at the end of the day, the states that are going to make the difference in this race.
Well, I know these people, all right? I know them, my family members. White working class.
Pennsylvania, that is, right?
Pennsylvania, white working class. I was a Capitol Hill cop for a while, and I heard my first job on the Hill was a patronage deal. I worked in the office of the senator during the daytime and cop at night. But one of the great conversations I ever had was with this West Virginia policeman. His name was Leroy Taylor, and he was a country boy. And he said the reason the working guy loves his country is it's all he's got. And there's three things that gets to. And that's what the scab that's being ripped off by these ads and everything. Barack's got three things that are hurting him, and why he doesn't get the generic number, why he doesn't get this political science number of an 8-point spread maybe. And he doesn't match the generic number at all in terms of the 13-point spread. First of all, he's black. Secondly, he's got a Swahili name, Barack Obama, Swahili name, which is extraordinary in this country. Let's step back a bit. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And third, he comes from that sort of elite academic critical class that's critical of America. It's part of the way we talk. We're not sitting around sensitive. Working people are not that critical of their own country. Intellectuals talk about their country in a critical way. I don't mean like they don't like it, but they're critical. They say this is wrong, this is right, this has to be fixed, this is what we're working towards. They have a critical mindset. That's not a popular mindset. They've all lost the elections. All the elites have lost, starting with Adlai Stevenson and right through Dukakis, and anybody who grew up with a critical bent has lost, especially John Kerry, especially Al Gore, who think critically. You're all taught to think critically, but it's not a popular way to think. The popular way to think is like Sarah Palin. Well, I wouldn't say thinking, I'd say does. Whatever she does, she does. I wouldn't call it thinking. It's a very basic reaction. I love this country, I hate everybody else. Keep it simple, stupid. Okay, so what's Barack have to do? And I love politics. And it's always up to the politician to win. You can spend all your life complaining about gender, complaining about race, complaining about everything else. Hey, it's the business you've chosen. You're an American, you're born here, tough crap. You got to live here. And if you want to win, you got to beat the bad. If there's 5 quintiles of American white people, I'd say there's 1 quintile if you're black you can't get. Live with it. 1/5 you're not going to get. We know these neighbors, we know them, they got reasons for it. All they need is the latest permission slip. Whatever it is, they'll use it to vote against you. So you got to get that 4th quintile. The quintile that would probably vote for General Powell. Find that quintile and win them. Now what's Barack not done that he's starting to do to get that 4th? Working class people who are not racist but have an attitude. A familiar attitude. As we say in Philly, attitude. Okay, they say beautiful too. I'm learning this again. All right. I wonder why.
I'm in charge of teaching how to speak Western
Okay.
Pennsylvania.
Okay, what you have to do is talk like people talk. They don't talk about GMP, GDP, or any of that stuff. They don't talk about the theories of economics. They don't talk the way Barack has always talked. You talk about layoffs. He just started to do that a couple weeks ago. He starts to talk the way people talk. You know, they're laying people off at Hewlett Packard, 26,000. You know, Ford's not hiring anymore. Do you hear what happened down there? They're doing that. They're not hiring over there. Talk away. The people talk in the neighborhoods. He's only now begun to talk like that the last couple weeks. And that's the way regular working white, black people talk about in the barber shop, in a bar. Do you hear what they're doing over there? Do you hear what they're doing over there? Do you hear what's happening here? Do you hear he's out of work? God, yeah, my kid can't get a job. My kid's been going around. He's up to New York. He can't get a job. Talk like the people talk, and you can cut through the Swahili name. You can cut through the elitism immediately, because John Terry doesn't talk like that, and Al Gore didn't talk like that. And if you begin to talk like regular people talk about the economy, and don't keep saying kitchen table as if it's some foreign place, you know, for, you know, I mean, it's not, let them smell them in the linoleum. I mean, feel like you've been to a kitchen table recently. But I think it's talking, I think it's about politics. It's as basic as you get. If you talk like people, they'll think you're like them. And by the way, if you can't, you shouldn't get elected. If you can't talk like regular working people. And I think that Barack may be beginning to learn that. It's a late stage of the political career to beat. And let's face it, who's he beaten so far? He beat Alan Keyes. And Hillary was 10 times better at this than he is. Because she learned to go to Pennsylvania. And she didn't talk about bitter people and their guns. She talked about you getting a better deal on gas prices this summer. And she talked about regular people's problems up at Scranton. She's going to be up in Scranton this weekend. She's going to be very important to him in Pennsylvania.
Klein,
You look like you want
yeah,
to-
but she, you know.
She's got to help him.
But she lost on the gas holiday.
But she won in Pennsylvania by
People softened that.
9.4 points. She was supposed to win by 6. She beat.
She didn't raise the gas holiday until after Pennsylvania.
Well, look,
She lost it in
you can argue
Indiana
that.
and
You
North
can argue that.
Carolina. But I want
That's very intellectual, Joe. You don't get hurt looking out for the regular people.
Well, I'm not saying that you do, but let me just raise, you know, stepping back once again, I guess that's my role today. I want to talk about 1, 2, 3, and 4.
But Joe, before we get off this point, I wanted you to react. I want you to react to what
Pennsylvania, too. He knows.
because then I'll come back once you step back.
I just have one comment. I have my title for my biography of Chris Matthews. It's called Smell the Linoleum. That's my only comment for right now. Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt Joe from stepping back.
better step back.
He's got a lot of stepping back to do.
No, but we do. I mean, you know, John, what John said about this being the end of an era, it has all the smell of a raggedy end of a political pendulum swing. And I think that a lot of the assumptions that all of us have learned to assume, you know, can be called into question now. You know, when Al talks about the white working class, and Chris to a certain extent as well, what we should remember is that in the previous pendulum swing, the white working class was the throbbing heart of the Democratic Party. That changed, and now it may be changing again because of the seriousness of the situation and because of the fact that we've had a 30-year run of very conservative, very free market policies. And in foreign policy, you know, unipolarity and American military, you know, aggression. Which brings me to what Professor Geer said, and that is that we're at the end of another pendulum swing as well, another era. It's the Bush era of politics, which began with Lee Atwater, and it ending with, you know, the detritus of Karl Rove, which, you know, is Steve Schmidt. And you know, people don't remember that Ronald Reagan didn't go negative in 1980 and 1984. It was always morning in America. He was an optimist. It's the Bush family that brought us all this ugliness that we've lived with. And I think that, and I think that that will be their legacy, by the way. I think when the history of the time is written. And I think, as I said before, that the public is ready to step back from that. You know, Chris, the reason why the gas tax holiday didn't work is because people knew that that wasn't the real answer to this stuff. You know, I agree with you, you know, about talking about jobs and stuff, but Obama has been, you know, not to the extent that he should have, been talking about ways to get the economy going again in ways that would be, you know, I consider traditional liberal stuff. He has an infrastructure bank. He has a 10-year, $15 billion a year alternative energy program These are the kind of things that would have been laughed out of, the public square at any time during the last 30 years, but somehow seem to make a difference now. And I think people are picking up on that. They're picking up on the fact that McCain wants to give tax breaks to the wealthy, and Obama may want to give tax breaks to them. I think that all of those things are cutting, but the most important thing that's cutting, the biggest difference this year, is that Obama has made a strategic calculation that John Harwood is right, and that we're at the end of a pendulum swing, and that a sense of steadiness and positiveness will beat anger and negativism and negative ads.
Before I go to Geer, one second, Ann, you wanted to respond to something I think that Chris
I
was saying
can't,
about
I
that.
can't remember now what it was, but I
I
would
think
say.
it was gas tax holiday got you excited there.
That's right. I mean, I think we're discussing this, and, from the more sort of neutral perspective of covering these guys, we're discussing this as though Obama has been right on the economy all along, and it was his to lose. Early on in the campaign, even before the gas tax holiday, and I think it's fair to argue that other things went into who won Indiana and North Carolina besides the gas tax holiday, but even before that, the economy was the Hillary Clinton issue in this election. She came in with the Clinton legacy of the 1990s to run on. That was hers for a year and a half, going, starting the day she started in January of 2007 running. And over time, Obama has slowly developed the rhetoric that, yes, at times has sounded elite, it's been abstract, it's big numbers, but that's where he was starting from a position of, who is this guy? Does he even know what the economy is or how it works? We've never seen him before. We've seen him sort of go on an arc, got into a level where people believed that he knew what he was talking about, was a smart guy, and now he's had to come back down and talk like, I guess, like the kitchen table, wherever Main Street is. He started to actually do that in the last 3 weeks. I think the best example we've seen of his doing that, actually, was talking about the bailout rescue, whatever you want to call it, bill that we saw. We actually saw Obama be as the one who was selling it in terms of, here's what it means for you, average person, who's having to foot the bill here. But I hope we don't get sucked into thinking this was always his, of course, it's the economy, a Democrat's going to win it, because I think that was not a given from the outset.
To amplify your point, if you recall, Iraq was always Barack's issue. From when
Right.
it turned to the economy, and to you all's point, remember, even after it was concluded that Barack was going to win the nomination, he lost 2 states
Right.
where one can make an argument the economic times that these people have been hit the hardest, West Virginia and Kentucky, by more than 40 points apiece. Howard, and real quick, can you give us another autobiography
Just
title?
real quick point. I think initially Obama was quite cautious in terms of declaring the end of the era, as John Harwood is suggesting. He put the tax cuts out there. In other words, he has run very cautiously, at least initially, emphasizing tax cuts, running slightly to the right of Hillary, ironically, on health care, saying, no, I don't want a mandate, remember?
Right.
I mean, he's been very cautious about this, and I think it has less to do with ideology than it has to do with tone. With tone and temperament, as Joe was saying. It's this sort of end of the era of accusation is what he's positing here. And that's what the appeal is, I think, above all, and that's what McCain has risked losing by picking the ideological route that he picked before the convention.
Jonathan, just in your talks within 45 seconds, did they react to this at all? You get a sense of what he may do this evening based on some of the things you've heard?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, they want to keep up the sort of narrative of steady versus erratic, that Obama has kept us cool since the start of this crisis, and that he has, even though he's the younger and more, an experienced candidate, he has ironically been the one who has offered the steadier hand at the tiller. Just real fast, though, I want to point out, I think part of the problem that Obama has had in sort of grappling with running on the economy is the fact that he's never had to run a real tough general election campaign. He had a state senate seat from the south side of Chicago, Hyde Park. He basically won his seat in the U.S. Senate in Illinois by virtue of the Democratic primary. His general election was a total non-starter. And then he beat Hillary, of course, in a primary. But his strength has never been issues. Besides the Iraq War, which got him in the door in a primary full of Democrats who had voted for the resolution, his strength was process, identity, buzz. It was sort of, it's the cool thing. If you ask a lot of others why they loved Obama, they wouldn't rattle off health care or the economy. They would say, well, change, And so I think he's had to make a pivot from a sort of identity campaign to one that is more focused on issues.
Can I just make a point about Iraq? In both of these debates, if you watch the dial group lines, the public reacts much better to Obama and Biden on Iraq than they do to McCain and Palin, even though it's allegedly McCain's issue. And I think that the real turning point in this campaign came when the Iraqi government supported a withdrawal plan similar to Obama's, which took away
Right.
a good part of McCain's raison d'etre, and also really pissed them off.
Let me go to Geer. You've been wanting to react. I'm going to go to Harwood and
I want
Fromm here.
to, I guess, take a page from Joe Klein and step back as well, but I want to point out about 80. 80 was not a positive campaign. You know, the ads of Reagan were very, very negative against Jimmy Carter, but there was a difference in tone. That is that he ran against Carter because of inflation being high. He raised substantive kinds of issues. Fast forward to today, and what do you have? You have basically John McCain and Barack Obama sending out tons of ads with very low media buys, hoping they'll reel in the media's interest.
Cable TV, cable
And
TV.
this is a fundamental difference. That wasn't going on in 1980. They were talking about real issues, and now they're just throwing all this kind of stuff up. It's like throwing what's on the wall and what sticks.
We didn't have either cable TV or the internet.
YouTube, yeah.
Right, but it's a fundamental difference that's changing, and over the next 4 weeks, what I'm gonna be looking for is to see if any of these things hook. And if they do, then all of a sudden, you know, do we have a mini swift boat, whichever way, you know, whichever side? I don't know that it would go for McCain or Obama, but that could easily play out, and that's my bigger worry.
Al, and then Joe, let me come to you.
Just, I'd never argue with Joe Klein on Iraq, but I'm not a big fan of those dial touching your, you know, and seeing what the reaction is during the debate, because I think what's happened on in the polling, McCain actually does better than Obama on Iraq because it goes to the commander-in-chief issue, which again is his strength. But you know, I do disagree with Klein on about the Obama on the economy. I mean, I know he has a bunch of proposals, but I don't identify. I mean, it's hard to figure out any defining ideas for Obama. I think his temperament is an important thing. I mean, I think what happened on the economy is that the Republicans have given us a Hoover moment again. And it's, you know, that's why we're to the end of the year, because the bottom has fallen out of the economy. I actually lived through the 1980 election, and Reagan didn't have to do very much negative because the conditions in the country were so bad that people wanted to get rid of Carter, and all they needed to do was, you know, we needed to convince we just needed, Reagan just needed to convince the people that he wouldn't blow up the world, which he did in the debate, and once he did that, the bottom fell out of Carter. I think Howard Fineman just made a really important point. I mean, you know,
Completely by accident, I'm sure.
I love, you know, like Klein, I'm a policy guy in politics, and I think message and policies really matter. But there's such a difference today because of the internet and cable TV. In 1992, Bill Clinton ran with some defining ideas that showed that he was different than the Democratic Party, which had been losing elections. Welfare reform, 100,000 cops, national service, which Harold incidentally had a very good op-ed on today in the Tennessean. Those were turned out to be defining ideas. The reason they were is because we could go to 15 journalists, many of whom are on this panel, and if you convince them that you had good ideas, you set the context of the debate. That isn't the way it is anymore on issues. I mean, you get hit from every side, and Matthews is up there 24 hours a day on MSNBC, and you have all these bloggers, many of whom don't ever think about policy. And so the whole, you just can't control the context of a debate. And so, I mean, I think the fundamentals are in the you know, what I call a Hoover moment with the economic collapse has just absolutely changed the debate more than anything Barack has said.
Harwood.
I want to make 3 points real quick. First of all, I thought Chris was brilliant in describing that whole smell of the linoleum thing. It's been hard for me to understand why, in some cases, Obama has not gotten more upside on the economy than he has. He has lately, but earlier in the campaign. And I think that there's an antiseptic way that he talks about the middle class and the kitchen table and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's important. Secondly, though, on policy, he's got lots of policy. And in fact, when he was in a live nomination campaign with Hillary Clinton, he whipped her on the economy in some respects. The stimulus plan that he outlined is actually what the Congress ended up passing, not what Hillary Clinton was talking about. And so there's some leadership in that when you identify the solution that Washington eventually embraces. Finally, I think we can't lose sight and undersell the big thing that is behind all this discussion and over top of it and all around it, which is the challenge of getting a black guy elected president of the United States. The fact that we are 4 weeks from Election Day and he is 5, 6, 7 points ahead, that's a pretty big achievement. And forget the issue discussion, that tells you something about what they've been doing right.
In '76, at the zenith of probably not 38 years old, last 50 years, people's distrust with government because of Watergate. Jimmy Carter won by 0.08% of the vote. 92, 43% of the vote nationally with Clinton. Ross Perot helped. 96, Ross Perot helped again, 46.5% of the vote. In a lot of ways, I quarrel with some on the panel about the issue of race from this regard. It's hard for Democrats to win national races. I mean, this country has more of a conservative bent than anything else, and I think your analysis of the critical bent thinking is one that Democrats in the country ought to think longer and harder about. To your point, Harwood, for him to be ahead where he is right now is not only a remarkable thing, it's an historic thing for Democrats. I tend to think that even with the economy performing like it is, it's just hard for Democrats to convince the country that they won't impose a bigger government with a weaker defense system and moral values that are no longer important for the country. To Chris's point, these last 4 weeks will be a roller coaster ride in many ways. And not to ask for predictions, but you've named an autobiography for Matthews, Howard. As you think about the next 4 weeks, if John McCain were to pull this out and win this race, would he still be known as the Maverick, the Independent? Would he be known as the slash and burn candidate? What would if since you've become a great title guy for books, your own book, 13 Arguments for America now.
Amazon.com,
what would be the
13 Arguments.
Exactly. What would be the name of the book of McCain if he's able to pull this off? What would be the theme rather for the next 4 weeks if he's able to pull this off? And vice versa, what would be the theme for Senator Obama if he's able to hold this lead between now and next Tuesday late evening?
Okay.
I mean,
well,
4 weeks from now, Tuesday late
If
evening.
it's McCain, and I'll go back to my new best friend, the songwriter Chuck Cannon, it's American Soldier. It's in these uncertain times, perilous times, that people in the end, for some sense of security, wanted to, security in the largest sense, wanted to go back to before the time of the baby boom. I mean, parenthetically, one of the interesting things about this race is neither candidate is really a baby boomer. McCain is before the baby boom, and even though Obama is technically demographically a boomer at the tail end, he doesn't read like one. He's a Gen Xer. He comes across differently. So if McCain were to somehow manage to pull this off, it would be that the American people did not want to seem to be jettisoning whatever it is of value about the American military tradition of service as an emblem for the whole country. It's when Chris was talking about that fourth quintile, the one that would vote for an African American if it were General Powell.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about. If McCain somehow manages to pull this off, it'll be American Soldier. And if it's Barack Obama, it's one word, and that word is hope. That's the word he's run on from the beginning. Everybody wants change. Everybody wants change. It's a question of whether you're willing to make the leap of faith. And
Chris,
that's what he's selling.
I'm going to make you last because we're going to close out here. And give me the theme for John McCain over the next 4 weeks to win this and what it would look like, and the theme for Senator Obama.
Well, the problem for
No,
McCain-
Chris, you're last. I'm going to Ann. I'm going to come
Oh,
back
you
to
go.
Ann.
I'll think while he's talking.
Joe, you go. It's still my panel, so we're going to get Joe, you go.
For McCain, it would be, actually, I'm kind of liberal. The beer, it's the era of big government's back, and we're gonna take care of you. We're not only the daddy party in Chris's immortal formulation, we can also mother you a bit too. And And for Obama, it's, you know, my name may sound like I'm a terrorist, but I ain't gonna get crazy on you.
John? Look, I think that the McCain folks believe this, and most Republicans I talk to believe it, that McCain's got to make this race back about Barack Obama. When did he get a little boost? It came twice. It came in August when they did the whole celebrity rap, because it made the race about Obama. Second time was right after their convention where they savaged Obama. Both of those times the focus was off of George W. Bush, off of the GOP, off of John McCain, and was on Barack Obama. This is why they're doing this. Don't get too focused on William Ayers or Tony Resco. Those are just means to an end. The goal is, let's make this race a referendum on Barack Obama. Is this country ready for Barack Obama? And when they say that, that means one thing above board. Obviously, it can mean different things below the surface. So it's got to be about him. The biggest challenge I think that McCain's had the past 3 weeks on a meta level is not just the economy. It refocused American attention on a broken, dysfunctional capital and a president they can't stand anymore. President Bush emerged. People in this country were reminded why they think that the country's on the wrong track, and they saw visibly in the president the reason why they think they think that. That's a tough thing for McCain to overcome, and that I think has played a huge role in sort of turning his numbers south.
And
I agree with all of you guys. I think Howard's point about the war hero is probably the one for McCain. I think it would be a traditional notion of a patriot versus what Obama has tried to describe as a new patriotism. That if you love your country, you can make this leap of faith. You can trust somebody who's younger, who's black, to be the president.
John Geer?
McCain, I think McCain, if he wants to make news and he wants to try to turn this thing around, if he plays to the kind of negative personal stuff and tries to make it about Obama, I don't think it works. I think he gave that away when he picked Sarah Palin. And as the campaign unfolds and Barack Obama continues to do well, that makes it harder and harder an argument. And Carter faced that in 1980. And as Al said about the debate, which was correct, it was a week before the election, Reagan didn't come across as unpresidential. In fact, quite to the contrary, very presidential, and turned the election to a landslide. McCain should, try to, in some sense, distance himself from his own campaign, his own handlers, take a page from Joe Klein's book and say, look, I'm not going to go negative here. I'm going to speak to the American public because I can fix things. And in fact, he might even be bold enough to say, look, I'm going to rise above partisan politics. I'm only going to serve one term. I'm not even going to worry about re-election. I'm going to try to fix this situation right now, and you have my word, and you can trust me to do it, and just change the debate that way rather than playing into the personal stuff.
Obama?
No, for Obama, he just needs to continue to do what he's doing, look presidential. I mean, if in fact, McCain were to pursue the strategy, which I'm sure he won't, just because I said it, he won't. I mean, there's nothing there. Obama just needs to continue to try to connect with voters. That quintile, I like that distinction.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's absolutely right. And those kids in the class.
So you would title his book The Fourth Quintile?
Yeah, I think that's right. Because if he can get that,
sell a lot of books with that title.
we might sell as many as Harwood and Seed did, but there was wants to go there.
However, Smell Linoleum has bestseller.
Al?
A great political mentor of mine, the late Gillis Long of Louisiana, once said, for a Democrat to win, you need the compassion to care and the toughness to govern. If McCain's going to come back, he's got to demonstrate he has the compassion to care, connect on the economic issues. Obama has always had a hard time closing the deal. To close the deal, Obama needs to demonstrate the toughness to govern. If he does that, if he shows people that he's bigger than his party, he will win going away.
John?
I think Jonathan's right. The election is about Obama in the end. And I think the whole dynamic of the last month of the campaign is John McCain saying he's risky and Barack Obama saying I'm steady. And whoever can control that argument, or if it's in the case of Obama, just avoid getting damaged too much, that's going to decide the outcome.
Chris, while Chris is talking, we're going to take 3 questions from the audience. If I get 3 good hands quickly, we'll go when Chris Matthews gives us his themes here, then we'll close out. Chris?
Well, first of all, John Seigenthaler is here, and that's a great honor to be with you, John. And, I've been razzed by the priests of my profession for showing an emotional reaction to Barack Obama and admitting it. You have to understand that people of my age, and some of us are my age here, the 60s was a great thing. You know, we loved the 60s. Whatever you hear about it, we loved it. We loved it. And I try to tell my kids about it. You get a glimpse of it when you see Dennis Hopper in a commercial, okay? That's all we have left, and he's going commercial.
But we don't tell our kids too much.
No, but let me tell you, there was a zest when you were a place like Chapel Hill, and you're walking around the campus and you're hearing the Beatles record, I'm a walrus, ooh, ka-choo, and you can't get that out of your head, because that is the 60s. And they're facing 1A in the draft. You're about to go in the Peace Corps, and it just was an amazing time, with all the hell of it and the tragedies and the assassinations. There's a glimmer of that. When you hear Barack Obama speak, you hear something of that. And a lot of guys my age are really taken with that, and women too, obviously. And so if you want to know what the 60s are about, just listen to some of the early speeches of Barack Obama. I'm not sure it'll hold, but it was there in the early going. And so now about John McCain. John McCain's problem right now is the Titanic is sinking. And we're all in the Titanic. And the band's playing, Near My God to Me. And there's a lot of nobility out there in the people. They're holding on. The American people and most people are very noble. And what's John McCain look like he's doing right now? He's running around seeing if the other guy, Barack Obama, belongs in first class or not. That's not an attractive picture when the Titanic's sinking. They have a guy running around checking somebody else's ID card. And that's what he's doing. He's checking to see if he belongs in first class or not. That's not going to work. So I think this election's potentially about a very noble thing, which is strength and generosity. First African American president, let's call it what it is. A sense of hope at a time of real political potential desperation. Nobility. The band did play. The 1,500 cabin boys did stay aboard. The fact is the country will hold. And it'll hold if this guy running for president holds his demeanor. And McCain has to find something of that too. I think it is the soldier. It is the old soldier. It's the guy we in the press have always been taken with, especially guys who didn't serve in Vietnam. Have always been taken with the guy who took the bullet in a sense and never complained about it. In fact, like a World War II guy, never bragged about it until recently. And so the new John McCain isn't as attractive as the old one. The one this week is the least attractive if he does what people think he might do tonight. I agree completely with Howard, and he's figured out the dynamic tonight. People do not like seeing low-brow political behavior.
Right.
And if they have it in their presence, they will react viscerally. And so if you smell any bad politics tonight, that audience in that room will react dramatically. It's going to be very tough for John McCain. And maybe that's a good thing.
Let me see 3 hands. I'm going to pick in the far back. My man right there in the far back. Yes, sir. Yes. Stand up, tell your name and where you're from. I know you are, but tell them who you are.
My name is Joseph. My name is Joseph.
We can hear you.
All right. My name is Joseph Williams. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. And to go back to what Mr. Matthews was saying towards the beginning about the 13-point spread with the generic ballot, he said that it looks like people are running to the Democrats. When I kind of think they're probably just running away from the Republicans. And I guess what I'm asking is, do you think they're running more towards the Democrats or more away from the Republicans? And based on that, is what we're seeing this year just another shift, like what we saw in '76 after Watergate, and '80 after Carter, '92 with Clinton, 2000 getting away from the Clinton years, and are we seeing just another pendulum swing that, if it does go to Barack Obama, then in a few years, if all the nation's problems aren't solved, we'll just see the cycle continue, or is this a paradigm shift that's going to last for several decades, and it is indeed the end of the Republican era?
I think maybe the initial reaction is clearly it's a binary system. You have to vote for the outs if you don't like the ins. You're dead right in your assumption. But it was raised to the possibility that the paradigm of government isn't the solution, it's the enemy or the problem. I think that's gone. I think if you look at the main elements of American economic success in the 20th century, energy, cheap energy, transportation, fabulous transportation, the best in the world. Rail, everything, we had everything, the highway system, everything. Education, the best in the world. And regulation, smart regulation starting in the 30s with the SEC. All that smart regulation, those 4 elements have to be recovered, I believe. And that's probably a Democratic mission more than a Republican mission.
Joe, let me get a few more questions. I'll let you answer. Yes, sir, right there. Yes, sir, in the corner. Just you.
My name's Jeff Berry. I'm from Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. I'm curious to know what an Obama administration would do for race relations in this country in 4 to 8 years.
Joe, you want to take that and maybe
Well,
answer 30 seconds on the
I
end?
think that, let me come at that from a different direction. It's striking me, now that I think about the last hour or so here, that the only subgroup, the only demographic subgroup we have talked about is white working class males. And that represents an old paradigm. This is a country where where people who make things with their hands and work in factories and all the rest, that is the past. The new America, which I think Barack Obama really represents, is a multiracial America. Look on your campus. Look in this audience. It's a multiracial America, a multi-ethnic America, where those white people are going to have to find their way to become part of it. Because there are a whole lot of people in a whole lot of states throughout the country who are learning to live with this. And I think that the biggest thing that Barack Obama would do as president would be to be a living demonstration that the things that we have in common are more important than the things that divide us.
Well, we're not the last of the Mohicans, okay?
But you're only one group among many. My parents were.
Jesus. Yes, ma'am. You, yes, ma'am. Get in the mic.
I'm not a student, and I'm older than Harold Ford.
Tell us your name.
My name is Tiffany Patterson. I'm a professor of African American and Diaspora Studies and History and American Studies here at Vanderbilt. I was born in the South, and I grew up in near Chicago. I want to ask this question of Chris Matthews and John Harwood, perhaps, because I do disagree with Harold Ford here and watching him on television, because it seems to me that you always want to downplay the question of race in this campaign. And I think it's there. It's just not there the way we're accustomed to seeing it there. And I'm concerned about this fourth quintile. As a historian, I have a long memory, and I know how impactful our history is on the present. Can you comment on possibilities about their fourth quintile in terms of its size? That's what seems to be very unclear to me in this election. There's so much enthusiasm for Barack Obama, but I don't trust it all. I trust some of it, but not all of it. Could you comment on that?
Well, we know the demographics in terms of age groups. We know that if the CBS poll 2.5 weeks ago had it that if only people under 45 could vote, Barack would win by 16 points. If only people over 65 could vote, he'd lose by 17 points. So it's almost, you can predict it. It's predictive. That wonderful new tape by what's her name? Sarah Silverman talking about her grandparents living in Florida, trying to convince them. I mean, it's pretty much a predictive fact that age is a lot to tell you about ethnicity in this country. 20 years ago, kids stopped telling their parents that the teacher was black. They didn't think it was important to say that when they went home. The parents didn't know it until they went to the PTA meeting. I mean, years of my generation, somebody would have mentioned that. I mean, it would have. So the salience of race has definitely declined among the younger people. I used the fourth generation. I came up with that idea myself, sort of anecdotally. There's 5 quintiles, because I do know there is definitely a portion that Eddie Rendell's right about. There just is. And I did see that Stanford study about a week ago, which was challenged, of course, by our network and all. But there is a sense that there's some people that you're just not going to get, older people. And then you get the second crowd, which are like the people who have the attitude of the old attitude of race we all grew up with. But they're willing to compare that or to balance that off with other factors. They're willing to look at intelligence, party label, attitude, and they're willing to like the guy or dislike the guy, depending on a lot of other factors. It's not just simply, I'm not going to vote for a guy because he's black. But, I mean, I'm with you. I think there's a certain portion that just are going to vote that way. And by the way, what they do is they spend the whole campaign season looking for permission slips so they can vote the way they want to vote. You know, his name's Obama, or, you know, he's a terrorist, or I'm sorry, he's a Muslim. That's a great giveaway line when I hear it from my relatives. Like, he's a Muslim. Well, I think I know what you mean. It's just an attitude that is hard to fight. And the good news, of course, is that it is a minority. And I'm telling you, I'm finding that phenomenal. I mean, maybe you don't agree with me, but I think a minority of, first of all, you don't hear the N-word ever anymore among people you know. Ever. And I never heard it. I was never allowed in our family, ever allowed to use bad words like that growing up. There were some words that were used, though, a little milder. And there was some of that growing up, certainly. But that's gone, completely gone among my kids. There is nothing there. that's racial. It's just not even, they don't know what we're talking about. Of course, they have different attitudes about gay marriage too that are totally different than they were when we were growing up. And abortion and things like that are going maybe the other way. There's certain things that are definitely changing out there, but I think you're right to know it's still there. I think you're wrong to think it's determinative. I think Harold's right, it's not determinative anymore.
I didn't say it was determinate, I'm saying that we need to pay attention to it and try to determine what its impact is.
Yeah, I know.
And I do agree with you on this, because I'm old enough to remember those elections you've been talking about, and I never thought I'd never lived to see a black candidate come this far.
Yeah.
So-
By the way, the standard is very high for making a mistake. If you look at Ed Brooke in Massachusetts, the very few African-American senators there are. Ed Brooke, he had family problems, you know that. And of course, Karen Wesley Brown had Cozy Matthews, a wrong relationship. We got too many trips to Nigeria, right? But those are not necessarily the things that would have beaten a white candidate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can I just say the really smart, the incredibly resonant thing about what Chris is saying about that fourth quintile is placing it in the military. Because the U.S. military experience in this country, especially since Vietnam, especially since the all-volunteer army, is a multiracial experience where people are, where skin color isn't the determinant of who the boss is. And I think that the next great generation of political leaders in this country are going to come out of the veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan war, and they are going to be not black or white, but they're going to be green.
Howard, you want to comment?
Just briefly, if you look at who the Democrats are who won presidential elections after John F. Kennedy, they're all small-town Southerners, okay? Lyndon Johnson, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton. If you had it to design a way to elect an African-American to minimize what we sometimes call the Bradley effect, then you would take a military veteran from a small town in the South, an African-American. That's the way you would design it. You wouldn't design it to be a guy from the south side of Chicago who speaks fancy and who went to Columbia and Harvard, okay? So Obama's...
With a Swahili
name. With a Swahili name. So Obama's doing it in the most difficult possible way. You'd want a black Jimmy Carter is what you'd want. But in a way, though, Obama, to me, relates to Jimmy Carter in this sense. Jimmy Carter was viewed as a weird outsider, too, don't forget, by a lot of people. He was not considered mainstream. And the only other, and so there's that relationship. The other point I would make is this. The incredible digestive powers of this country are remarkable. The way I view it, African Americans, in a sense, were immigrants to mainstream America after World War II and after the Civil Rights Movement. Coming north, coming finally into full civil rights. So in that sense, they're an immigrant group in a way that's only now reaching the point where they can bid for national leadership. And this is a difficult thing given our history, given 400 years of history. But I think there will be a Bradley effect on the national level. I think it'll be...
You better explain that.
Okay, what I'm saying about this, I'm talking about Tom Bradley, who was the mayor for many years ago, the mayor of Los Angeles. People thought he was going to be elected governor of California. He was ahead in the final polls. I forget by how many points, 5 or 6 or more points. He ended up losing. That's why they call it the Bradley effect. Now, Harold may disagree with me on this. I think that...
We had the reverse Bradley effect. The national
Right.
poll showed us down 12. We came within 3.
Right.
This Professor, don't
Yeah.
confuse my points about race. I just think if you focus, having been a candidate before in an area that the majority of people were predominantly looked different than me, if I made the issue I thought about race, that's my only point. I don't discount the fact that race plays a role or impacts races. But anybody who runs for office as an African American running to convince a wider group, a larger, more diverse group, focuses on race will probably, I believe, have a harder time. My experience is different than yours. I was actually on a ballot. I trust the historical understanding of it. 2, to the point you're making up here, remember, there are more white guys that have lost races in the South and for presidency than black guys. For Barack to be where he is, he's not running as a black. These kids who are wearing Obama, that young lady wearing Obama t-shirt right there who's in my class, isn't excited about Obama because he's black. She's excited because of the hope, the change, and what he means for America. To the extent that Klein is right, white guys are not unimportant in races, I might add, yet. There may be a point, and I'm not wishing that, but the reality is we're not there at that moment.
What I was just saying was that that they've been mythologized, you know.
Right.
The white working class has been mythologized, but this new multi-class,
But it's someone that was on the race. I'd have taken a few more of that old group in West Tennessee and East Tennessee, be sitting here as a U.S. senator. So that's the only point I make, is someone that actually had to put his name on the
But
ballot.
what I was gonna
and defend
say
it.
is that I thought that, at least in polling terms, tell me if I'm wrong here, that there was no, quote, Bradley effect in your case.
That we had the reverse effect.
No, but in the end, the final polls were pretty accurate as to where the race was,
The
weren't
final
they?
Gallup poll over the weekend was about 3, but you're talking about the Mason-Dixon.
Right. The Sunday before the race, we were down 12. I don't want to we were down 12. Well, you're making the right point. I agree with you. What's your point?
The only open question is whether, I think that's gone in local races, I think it's essentially gone in Senate races and so forth. The only question is whether there's something special, some special chemistry or emotion about the presidential election that is going to still allow that factor to play big, and we don't know the answer to that.
And the other
We're gonna
question
see.
we're
We're gonna
missing is,
see.
why would a person lie to a pollster? Why don't they just say you're for McCain? He's a war hero. Almost any Democratic white person would say, I'm for McCain, without any hesitation. Why wouldn't it show up in the poll? That's another question. There's such a popularity about McCain among white working class. Why would you have any hesitance to say, I'm with McCain?
John?
And that's why you wonder if there is going to be a Bradley among certain. Then there's an interesting ethnic piece to this too. But
I suspect that there will be a modest Bradley effect, smaller than ever before. I don't have much to add to what my colleagues, but I just wanted to relate one small anecdote which underscores for me the sense of wonderment I have about sort of where we are in our politics in 2008. 4 years ago, during the Democratic primary race, I had a conversation with David Axelrod, who then was the strategist for John Edwards' campaign. And John Edwards had come out of nowhere, and he had finished second in Iowa. There was a moment where it looked possible that he was going to get the Democratic nomination. So I was talking to Axelrod one day, and expressing a lot of admiration for John Edwards' skills and talent. That I thought he really had limitless potential for some of the reasons that Howard mentioned. He fit the type of Democrat who succeeded nationally, and to my ear was sort of had more perfect pitch than some of the others, actually. And he says, I just want to tell you, I've got a guy coming up in Illinois who's better than John Edwards. And I said, who is it? He said, well, he's a state senator. He's in a Senate primary. I said, yeah? He said, he's a black guy. I said, I said, what's his name? He said, Barack Obama. And I'm like, get out of town. Why the guy named Barack Obama to statewide office, much less anything else. And look where we are right now.
John, do you want to Geer?
On the Bradley effect, the Bradley effect's very old. I mean, this was 30 years ago, and I think it's probably, if it exists, it's going to be small. But what I would worry about with all these national polls is that the polling organizations, their ability to identify the likely voters, their models are based on past voting behavior, which, if indeed all these registration data and the general excitement means that a lot of people, including a lot of the African American community, are going to turn out for the first time, that in fact we could see a reverse Bradley effect, but not for the reasons that race is involved, but simply that the inability of the polling industry to identify who the likely voters are. Because you can see, I mean, there was one Gallup poll that right after the convention that set people afire, where McCain had like a 10-point lead among likely voters. And it was a 2-point lead among registered. Not my conclusion was this likely voter model is a disaster. They don't know what they're doing.
Well, the USA Today Gallup poll yesterday that showed voters 18 to 29 for Obama by, I think it was 61 to 32%. That's an unbelievably powerful number. I think they said it was the widest gap in any voting group they'd ever seen. We have no idea whether those people, you people, are going to turn out. There's no way to know. There's absolutely no way to know, and that's in one of the respects what's the main thing that this election is about.
Although we did see in the Iowa caucuses, I mean, one of the reasons that the Clinton folks thought they were going to win and came in third is they completely underestimated that young people would turn out.
But caucuses are different because you can organize and bring people in. I don't know what the answer to the question is about whether they're going to turn out, but as you look at elections since 1988, national elections, there is very little difference in the percentage each voting category is in the electorate from election to election. So that's obviously historic and not predictive. But so this could be
But there's a real, you said that you can organize caucuses. To me, the great paradigm shift, the technical paradigm shift of the Obama campaign has been to move money toward organization and away from advertising, to make the decision that organization is every bit as important as advertising. And you saw it on the ground in Iowa, you see it throughout this country. There's a whole generation of young people, people your age, who to me, and I agree with Chris about how wonderful we were, when we were kids, who are the most impressive generation of political organizers that I've seen since the baby boomers, and I just hope you're a lot better at governing than we were.
3,000 paid employees, it's a lot for our campaign.
The conversation, as we close here, it's appropriate that we would talk about young people and their role in elections. John Seigenthaler, who was remains one of the great political minds, one of the great heroes and defenders of speech and the First Amendment in this country, known in circles, all of press circles, political circles, all around this country, for that matter, the world. His son, a partner and colleague with Chris at NBC. Give us a minute historical sense of, as you look at Obama and you remember the Kennedy race, what that means. And I find two words that have not come up here, interestingly enough, two themes. One is poor people, and two is the South. And John Seigenthaler, give us 2 minutes on that as we close out here. And we again thank you for allowing us to use the center for this important conversation.
I listened with great fascination to Jonathan and to Chris and Ann, and to Joe and to Jonathan and to John. I know John Geer and Halperin have as well. I was just, it occurred to me that as you sit here, so many young students, that there might be among you aspiring journalists. And I will tell you what they do, particularly in times like this, contributes not only so much to what we know about the candidates and the issues, but beyond that, in a real sense, they contribute to democracy in this country. I've listened to the polls, and Congressman Ford and I yesterday in the panel looked at the current polls in the southern states. And they tilt against the national trend in every case except Virginia, North Carolina, and Florida. They tilt heavily, double digits, in favor of John McCain against Barack Obama. Certainly there is some of what some pundits would call the Bubba vote that contributes to that. Certainly there is a history in this region, I know and love, there is a history here of racism that has influenced politics, and perhaps some of it, I certainly believe some of it is an undercurrent, and certainly in his race for Congress, a negative campaign in the last weeks that was racist in tone, I am convinced defeated him. I've listened, and so the South, in a very real sense, if you look at those numbers, is out of kilter with the rest of this nation. Now, this state is in Obama's, is in McCain's corner. Obama has this district. This is the home of the Democratic Party of Tennessee. But out and in Memphis, there is another very strong Democratic stronghold. But statewide, we are something in the neighborhood of 15 percentage point, seeing McCain over Barack Obama. As I listened, and thought of all of us as viewers of the campaign, in some ways, we'll look at it differently than these professional journalists will. Their keen insights and their experience have them focusing on questions that may be specific, they may be issue-oriented, they may be personality-oriented. The rest of us will look at it in a general way, and the only thing I can think of that they have not discussed today is something I think of as the possibility of the candidate's self-inflicted wound. It has happened as I look back in history, and they'll all remember it. It can be something as plain as Governor Dukakis asked a question by Bernard Shaw. Governor, you're against capital punishment. You said that. What if your wife Kitty were raped? And it's, to use Chris's word for it, a term for it, Dukakis didn't answer. He didn't talk like an ordinary citizen would talk, with anger. It was almost a callous response, a self-inflicted wound. It can be as simple as something as a candidate like President Bush looking at his watch. It can be something more substantive. Gerald Ford, President Ford, debating Governor Carter to be President Carter, says, you know, I assert that the nations of Eastern Europe are not under Soviet domination. And given a second chance, he repeats that. Now, sometimes we see it as we don't like the watch, the look at the watch, we don't like Dukakis' answer. Sometimes they will have to tell us the next day, as they did in the case of President Ford. That self-inflicted wound can very well tilt the way people in this country feel about what they see and what they hear. And as I say, they will explain it to us the next day and the day after, and then there's another debate at Hofstra, and there's another opportunity, sad opportunity for another self-inflicted wound. So I will watch the debate tonight, remembering in '81, I once did what they did, and I'll watch what they do after that with admiration and respect and with thanks, and with great thanks to them all for coming here to the Seigenthaler Center today. There also may be among you aspiring politicians, and here is a model for that. In their minds, those professional journalists, however they may write what they see, down deep for both Barack Obama and John McCain, I will tell you, they have visceral and cerebral admiration for what politicians do. These two candidates, however they may be required to write about them, they all admire them, and I would just suggest to you, journalism is going to be a great career for a long time to come. The media is changing, but they're changing with opportunities. So think about being aspiring journalists. Let them be your role model. Think about politics. And if you do, let this courageous, intelligent young man be your role model. Thank you all for coming here today.
Fortune and Mark Dahlhaus, our Director of Public Affairs at the University, and Mark Dahlhaus, who did so much to make this happen. Give them a round of applause.